All righty, welcome to Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan. Rob forgot to hit a button, and he's doing his intro, but nobody can hear him. So I'm going to bring him up, or he brought himself up, and now he's going to do his intro.
Well, hey, you know what? Welcome to Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan. Rob. This is my first time doing this. I know I've been doing this for over a year now, but go figure, I mess up. We got a great show. Steve Stockton, Missing Persons, Mysteries. We'll bring him up in just a minute. He's got over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, 30 million views already. But I got to pay the bills really quick. If this is your first time here, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up and hit the alert bell and share with friends. You can also find us on YouTube at Texas Front Porch. You can also find us on Odyssey Radio, iHeart Radio, and KPNL Radio out in Oregon. Also, you can find us wherever podcasts are broadcast. That's right, wherever podcasts are broadcast. We're on Facebook at Texas Front Porch. You can also reach us by email at paracryptidencounters@gmail.com or by text at 972-559-0988. Hey, you know what? Don't forget, subscribe. Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. I'm 140 away from 1,000 subscribers. My first goal is getting clear. I'm getting some clarity. If you enjoy our content and would like to support us, the Super Chat is always open, and you can Venmo us a symbol sign at text 6777 text. And if you like to fade out the music, because I'll probably mess that up as well, we'll get rolling here. All right. Yeah, you know, it was inevitable that I was going to mess up something, Tex, but you know what? Trial and error. You live, you learn. And I think people probably got a chuckle out of that one. And I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was hearing music, and I looked down, and I see you talking, but you're not. And I'm like, oh, he forgot to put it up there.
You know, I did. So, hey, you know, things happen just like they happen with the missing people at our national forest, right? And we've got a great show, everybody, in line for you. Before we get into that, Tex, I was just kind of, I guess bitching is the word. It's 90 degrees here, but I know you've been suffering with some 115-degree heat. But now I found out that, hey, it's like it's not that hot today. What's going on with Texas?
Oh man, we had a cold front come through. We're like down to 92 today. You know, so it's break out the snow skis and get ready to shovel the sidewalks. And
you know, last time I snow skied, they forgot to show me how to stop. I'm going down well, we don't have mountains in lower Michigan, so they call this a big hill. And you know what? I'm glad that there was bales of hay lining a fence at the end, because that's how I stopped. I plowed right into it. I was pretty nimble.
That's what we call breaks down here, is bales of hay too. So
but without further ado, Steve Stockton is with Missing Persons Mysteries. He created this in August of 2018, and they create content on unsolved disappearances, unexplained phenomenon, unsolved mysteries, true crime, and twice a month, Tex, they share stories that are sent into their channel by their subscribers. And they also have bizarre encounters with cryptids, humanoids, and the paranormal. Without further ado, I'm going to bring up Mr. Steve Stockton. Man, Steve, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining for the first time on Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, with my sidekick, Tex.
Yeah, Rob Tex, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on, man. I've got a couple of cases that me and you can talk about around here. So maybe you can lend some. Maybe you can give us a hand, because we've been trying to find some information out about them. But.
Yeah. Sometimes it's difficult with some of these disappearances when people are gone. No trace of them. The dogs give up. Police give up. Where'd they go? That's the age-old question.
It's great. I want to get into that. And as I said, for our people on Odyssey Radio and iHeart Radio, you're going to get the first 52 minutes live. Then you're going to want to be here for the second half to listen to Steve Stockton, because you're going to have to subscribe to YouTube on Texas TX' Front Porch, or my channel, Bigfoot Michigan Rob. It streams on my channel as well. And Steve, to get it started, how did you end up? I mean, you've got a great channel. Everybody subscribe right now or after the show. Missing Persons Mysteries, 217,000 subscribers. I'm trying to hit 1,000, and you already got 30 million views. I appreciate what you do, the hard work. What got involved with this?
Yeah, well, that's sometimes that first thousand's the hardest. That's like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
And Bill Melder, partner in the channel, he's actually the one that started it. And I've got my personal channel, 13 Past Midnight, and I mainly tell spooky stories and stuff over there. And I'd recorded a video, a thing out of one of my books where I'd narrated about the Dennis Martin disappearance from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And Bill heard that and said, I like what you're doing. Come over here and narrate for me. And I would get that in the comments occasionally. People want me to come narrate. And I'd go look, and they might, not even have 100 subscribers or something. And I was a couple thousand at the time. So I thought, I'll just hang on here. But I went and looked at Bill's channel. And at that time, he had 10,000 subscribers. And, that seemed like a lot. So I went over, and the rest, as they say, is history. We partnered up. He made me full partner in the channel. And last year, about this time, I think we'd hit around 70 or 80,000. And then, like you were saying there, we just passed 217,000 yesterday morning. So it's growing, blowing up exponentially there. And I love it. I love what I do.
I love what you do too, because I've went back and watched. I've been a subscriber for probably about 6 months, and I was thinking, man, I got to have Steve on. This is just got great content. And you were just up in the Mount St. Helens area, right? And or in that area, and I noticed one of your last videos. It had to do with that area, Mount St. What was it, Steve? It was
Yeah, it's Mount St. Helens.
Yeah, and if you just want to walk us through some of your stories and how you came across these things.
Yeah, well, that's kind of interesting. Mount St. Helens is not too far from where I live now. I'm in St. Helens, Oregon, and it's so named because you can see Mount St. Helens from here, but it's actually across the river in Washington. But Sandy, my head writer, travel companion, we go out on road trips about once a month and see what we can scare up. And on the way to where we were going, further up into Washington State, we decided to make a brief stop there at Mount St. Helens. I filmed an intro and outro. I'm starting to do a lot more stuff on camera now. People seem to like that. But interesting place up there. The most famous thing was the eruption in 1980. 57 people lost their lives. Still a lot of people unaccounted for there. I mean, it's obvious where they went to. They're buried under mountains of ash and whatnot, lava. But there's some other stuff there, some real interesting stories that we uncovered. One that I'd never heard of until I lived around here. It's called bat squatch. It's kind of a cross between a bat and Sasquatch. It's as big as a Sasquatch, but it's got a wingspan of anywhere from 20 to 50 feet, depending on who you talk to. But that first seen right after the eruption. And there's been some parallels drawn between that and the Mothman sightings. And it's been seen in other places. Mount Shasta in California, that's a weird spot. We went down there in March and checked that out down there. But we like to get out and ramble around. In June, we covered about 1,500 miles in a little over a week, 20 cities, 73 places, and we're just out looking for stories, talking to people, visiting some of these places particularly that have a lot of missing people. And here in this area, that's Mount Rainier in Washington, and also Olympic National Park and Olympic National Forest. A lot of people gone missing there. And then there's rumors of occult and ritual activity up there. Ted Gunderson, ex-FBI agent, claims that there's places in the Olympic National Forest where there's literally bodies buried everywhere. Now, I didn't see anything along those lines, but I didn't stay in there after dark either. That's one thing. Doing these stories has helped me to realize that it's not as safe and serene and peaceful out there in the wilderness as you think it is. Sometimes if you go out ill-prepared or ill-equipped, you're just asking for trouble. And then there's the other side of that: human predators, cryptids, UFOs, aliens. Who knows what's out there for sure.
Yeah, and isn't it true too? There was a story some years ago in the eruption that there was they found Bigfoot or Sasquatch bodies around that area.
That's the one of the rumors or the legends anyway, that they recovered some bodies out there that the government did. And again, that's unsubstantiated, but kind of stands to reason. You've got the Ape Canyon there too, famous site of 1924 Ape Canyon Sasquatch attack. There were some miners in there that claimed they were attacked by a group of Bigfoot or Sasquatch that threw boulders down on their cabin, and one of them said a big hairy arm reached into a hole in the wall there and tried to grab an axe. And then I can't remember the gentleman's name, but one of the main ones, he went on to write a book. They called them ape men. This was prior to Sasquatch being in the nomenclature and things. But he wrote a book called I Battled the Ape Men on Mount St. Helens. And he claims to have shot one of them the next day after the attack when they were getting ready to leave. Saw one up on a bluff, took aim, fired, and the thing apparently hit it. It fell off the bluff and down into the canyon below. And there's a paranormal group out of California that's been up there searching to see if there's not a skeleton somewhere, if he did indeed shoot and kill one, and it wasn't covered with the eruption of Mount St. Helens. But Ape Canyon's still there. You can visit that. Popular place to bike and hike.
Yeah, that's
It's
still
nice
one.
to get a cadaver dog up there.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah, it would
indeed.
have been. Yeah, move.
So
Go ahead, Tex.
now I know another place that is just out there in the Pacific Northwest that's just crawling with freaking missing people. And, well, I don't know. That may not be the best term, but reported cases and stuff is Humboldt County.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, I know a lot of people, they say, oh, well, it's the pot farmers and stuff like. I don't think it's all pot farmers. Because
Yeah,
I watched that documentary on it, and a lot of stuff just don't add up. It's more what they don't say than anything else in that.
And that you kind of have to read between the lines on that. But yeah,
Yeah.
Humboldt County got a lot of missing people up there. That's also the 101, fabled Highway 101 that goes all the way up the coast there. Bigfoot country, a lot of sightings up there. When I spoke at a UFO conference in San Francisco in March, and on the way back up, we took that 101 all the way up into Oregon. And it's some squatchy looking country out there, I got to say. And stopped there at the Legend of Bigfoot's little museum and gift shop. Interesting stuff. But the woods are just so thick out there. That's the thing to me. And it was the same, in just about all Northern California. There around Mount Shasta, just the tree growth is such that it'd be hard to bushwhack your way through there. So I can't imagine being lost out there, and what a terrible time you'd have just navigating through the woods, let alone if something was after you or somebody or whatever. But yeah, Humboldt County is known for its missing and just a lot of weird stuff. And like you said, I don't think it's all pot farmers. That may have been true at one time, but it's probably more meth cookers than pot farmers now. But I don't think they're responsible for that many of the missing. No,
I think there's well, and it's not too. I mean, it's not too awful far from where a lot of these recent movies that have been, these Sasquatch movies that have been, they seem to focus on that area, and
like I said, that is Bigfoot country. They're not too far from where the Patterson Gimlin film was made, and that whole area up there is just rife with it, depending on who you talk to. I've got a friend who's a Modoc Indian that lives just outside of Mount Shasta, a little town called McCall, and he's had all kinds of Bigfoot encounters and stuff in the woods there.
Yeah, because actually I just watched it again not too long ago. It's one of my favorite Bigfoot shows as far as movies go. The Lost Coast tapes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with what we've been running into out in the field and everything, I think that ain't far from what's going on out there. But getting back to Mount St. Helens. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that the spot where they those smoke jumpers supposedly rescued that Bigfoot that was caught in a forest fire?
Yeah, that's another one of the rumors. Again, it's unsubstantiated, but it makes for a good story anyway, and I believe it. I think there's And I think I believe it's in Washington State where they've got a law that now it's illegal to hurt, harm, maim, or kill
Mm.
a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. They're a protected creature. I know Idaho does it, and I think Washington has it now too. And to me, that's a good thing. I would hate for them to kill one. I hope if they ever do find one, it's already deceased. I don't want them to take one alive, because you imagine a creature that's used to being out in the forest, in the woods and things, how miserable it would be in a cage or a laboratory somewhere, being poked and prodded and blood draws and studied and stuff. So I don't want them to kill one, don't want them to take one alive. But if they find one that died of natural causes, then have at it.
And I think all of those have already been done, honestly.
Yeah, there's a lot that we don't hear about that's kept from us for whatever reason.
I do want to jump over on, like, and I derailed it from what Rob was talking about, and I apologize for that. But jumping back to Mount St. Helens and the missing people, what are some of the most they're all interesting, but you got any cases that really stand out to you out there?
Not so much on Mount St. Helens. Most of the ones there are fairly clear cut. They're either found deceased or found alive. And sometimes the ones that are found deceased, it can be under kind of strange circumstances.
Right.
But one of the most interesting cases I've ever heard was in 1950. And I can't remember the gentleman's Carter, a man named Jim Carter. No relation to the president, Jimmy Carter. But he was with a group up there skiing, and a group of 20 people. And he skied on ahead and was going to take a picture of them as the group skied by. Well, while they're on the way up to where he is, waiting with a camera, they see him coming back down the hill. And this is near Abe Canyon. And they said literally he was skiing like the devil was after him, just being really reckless, taking a lot of chances. Actually skied down an almost vertical slope, went down through a crevice there into the woods and disappeared, and they never found any trace of him. So again, something was after him up there, that they think, the people that was with him think that something chased him off the mountain. I don't know, might have been Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Batsquatch, who knows, but experienced outdoorsman, a world-class skier, and something spooked him, and last they ever saw him. And that's the thing with me that's so fascinating about some of these cases, is there's no trace of them found. A lot of people say, oh, a bear got him or a big cat. But in cases like that, there's going to be something left. A bear or cat's not going to eat your blue jeans. It's not going to eat your hiking boots or your backpack or your skis or whatever you had with you. But where they find absolutely no trace, that's the ones that really fascinate me. The ones where, they bring in drones and helicopters and FLIR, no sign of anything. The dogs either lose the scent or just won't track at all.
Right.
And I mean, that's what those dogs are trained to do. They love it. They enjoy what they do, their training. And when a dog lays down and won't track a person, there's either some kind of apex predator around there that the dogs don't want anything to do with, or there's maybe a weird or supernatural side to it. I want to share something with you here. Not this last time they had it, but the time before, I went to Squatch Fest across the river in Kelso, Washington, and I met Bob Gimlin, and I bought this from him. It's a still from the film, and he signed it there for me and put the date that the original
wow.
was 10/20/67. That's one of my keepsakes there. And he is
for sure
a wonderful man. He's in his 90s now, I think, and probably won't be around to do too many more of those. But I was coming through the area there where they were all set up, the vendor village, and he looks over at me and he's like, hey, kid. And he waves me over and he jumps up and he took my hand and just shook it real good. It's like, so good to see you. And then walked away, and the girl that was with me said, do you know him? And I said, I know of him. She says, well, he apparently knows you. And the only thing I can think of, he recognized me from the channel. I get that occasionally, but just a wonderful guy and full of stories. I mean, he's a real cowboy. He's not one of these guys that, I mean, he worked on the ranches and things out there prior to being famous for the film there of Bigfoot.
You
Yeah,
know, and I
he's definitely not a drugstore cowboy.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I can see Steve too, where you would be recognized, as I mentioned earlier, with your great growing channel with all your subscribers and views, and you know, you're mentioning about strange supernatural phenomenon and things. And what do you think, you know, moving forward? And again, we're going to get into some of your cases, and it all can't be cryptids, right? I mean, there's when you mention supernatural, do you think some of these people are going walking through portals, or is it is it a combination in your opinion? Well, give me your thoughts. Is it like everything you think?
I think
It's
it's a
not
little
one
bit of
thing.
everything. I think there's human predation. There's serial killers, the known serial killers
Mhm.
that have operated in the national parks. The FBI believe they had one, or maybe still have one along the Appalachian Trail back east. And I think there's animal predation. Some people do get eaten by cats
Yep.
and bear, but I've seen photographic evidence of where that's happened, and it's not pretty. And you can tell something happened there. It's not like it just took them and they disappeared. There's signs of a struggle. The ground cover will be disturbed, ripped clothing, blood, forensic evidence, things like that. But I believe there's some of that. Some of it's just purely by accident. Like I was saying earlier, you go out there ill prepared and ill equipped and maybe not as uh, good in the forest as you think you are. That's an accident waiting to happen. People that go off the trail and things like that. But again, even though some of those that are never found, I don't see how you can get off the trail sometimes in such a short amount of time to where you can never be found. And
Right.
sadly, there are people that go out there to end it all. You have people that decide to opt out. They'll go out in the woods, particularly national park or national forest seems to be a popular place. But again, if even if you were out there with that intention, I imagine it would be hard to get in a place in a short amount of time where nobody can find you, just within a few hours. Although there are places out there where you can definitely hide. That's another theory that there are feral people that
Yeah.
live in the national parks. Some have even said that they're cannibalistic. Others claim that it's some sort of Bigfoot human hybrid. There's a guy on YouTube called has a channel called South Force 10, and he talks about the feral people in the Smokies and how before the park came into existence in 1934, some of his relatives were hired to go in there and literally hunt those people by the government and thin them out. And goes along with that theory that that's the reason that some of the national parks are where they are as a way of containing these whatever they are. I mean, heard, like I said, human hybrids, Nephilim, uh, elementals, types of the Fae. And then and that's an interesting theory. Now people that believe in Bigfoot and believe in UFOs and flying saucers and stuff like that, wholeheartedly, you start mentioning the Fae, the fairy people, they'll laugh at you. But
Yeah.
if you look back into the Celtic countries, particularly Ireland and places like that in the 17 and 1800s, the Fae folk, that was almost a religion to these people. And in some places it still is. Scandinavia, they believe in trolls. They'll build a highway around a rock outcropping rather than blow it up and risk the whatever happens if the anger the trolls. But
Yeah. The
the
same thing
faith,
with the elves. They've got that. I
yeah.
mean, they'll, you know,
And Gemma Jade, one of my contemporaries, she writes for the channel sometimes. She wrote a book called Missing the Fae Theory, and it really delves into that. You ought to have her on sometime. Fascinating, fascinating stuff. And it, as far as anything I've ever heard, ties everything together. Bigfoot, UFOs, the disappearances, Glimmer Man, all this other stuff that's been seen. It's, if you look at it from a framework of the Fae, it's all that, because there's the Cherokee in eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina. They talk about the little people of the forest that they coexist with. They also talk about a race of hairy giants that they were at war with at one time. Well, there you go. That's fairies. That's Bigfoot. And just there was a story that I read from the early 1800s in Ireland about some people that were visited by some little men that came from the sky in a horseless carriage. That's a Bigfoot
hmm,
or a UFO story. So it just, the Fae theory really ties everything together, and it accounts for a lot of the circumstances. People wearing red tend to go missing. And you think that'd be just the opposite. If you're out in the greenery, the lushness of the forest, got something red on, you should be easy to spot. Well, according to the Fae theory, fairies hate the color red, and it angers them. It's like waving a red flag at a bull. So there's that. Another common thing that happens, people tend to go missing around berry patches, where they're in there picking them or just happen to be near them. Again, in the Fae legends, that's their food, and also where they hold their revelry and their mating and stuff. So if you're in there in the berry patch, you're kind of involved, you're interrupting the Fae and their activity. So again, it's way far out there. It's a stretch, but it's not any wilder than some of the other theories I've heard.
Yeah. And Steve, I do want to continue down this path, which you're speaking on, but I did, before I forget, you had mentioned about the ripped clothing and such. What's your opinion, your thoughts, and perhaps you've got a story on your channel. What do you think about, we're talking about the ripped clothing. What do you think about where you'll find a person that's gone missing, but you'll see their shirt, their pants, their shoes all folded neatly, placed on a rock somewhere, and it's the person that's gone missing's actual wardrobe? What's your thoughts on that? Have you come across any stories on your channel regarding that?
There's a lot where clothing is left behind. Heard of it hanging on fences, found up in a tree. And again, people say, well, that's animal predation. But again, there's no sign of it. And I don't think a big cat is just going to climb up in a tree and leave a shirt. Now, there's talk of a thing called paradoxical undressing, which is when you're suffering from hypothermia. Even though you're about to freeze to death, you feel hot because your body's giving off heat to try to warm the core. And that's the official explanation behind people undressing and leaving their clothes. But I don't buy that in all cases, because there's been clothing found in cases where it wouldn't have been a hypothermic situation. And one of the most interesting things to me is people that leave their boots behind. They found people's boots. There was one guy we covered a story about, again, seasoned outdoorsman. He was on his way from one hunting cabin to another to replenish his supplies. And instead of turning where he's supposed to turn, kept going straight. They found his boots. And then at some point later, they found his remains. And it was 12 miles from where they'd found the boots. And by the time they found the remains, he was pretty much gone. But he was within sight of a cabin that was occupied and literally just sat down and died. And they said in that case, it looked like he had sat down on a log and had simply melted.
Oh, wow.
He still had his socks on. His foot bones were in his socks, and the pants, I think the pants were maybe unbuckled or part of the way down, but they said it looked like he just sat down on a log, and I guess the animals did away with the rest of him. And this was in like 2 or 3 feet of snow in the wintertime when he initially went missing. Why on earth would you take your boots off if you're out walking in the snow? That makes no sense. And one of the theories on that is it's something that enjoys hunting humans for sport, but don't want to give them too much of a head start or let them get too far away, because they might get away. But if you think about that, if you wanted to slow somebody down and give them a little bit of a sporting chance, take their footwear. They're going to run, but they're not going to get far in the forest barefoot or sock feet even. And reminds me, out here in Portland, Oregon, have the Shanghai tunnels, where the 1800s, Portland was really like a Wild West kind of town. A lot of bars and brothels and things like that. And the story goes that people would be in a bar, in a brothel. They'd have something slipped into their drink, and then they would take their boots off and dump them down a shaft in the back. There was these tunnels that went to the river. And if you did wake up before you were on a ship headed for the Far East, pressed into service, the tunnels down there, it's sandy. And if you go and tour the tunnels to this day, there's still areas. They've cleaned a lot of it up, but there are places where you can see broken glass. So that was the whole thing. Take their boots, throw them down this shaft into the tunnels. If they do come to, they're groggy, they're half awake, their shoes are missing, it's dark, and the ground's covered with glass. So they're not going to try to get away. And I kind of see that as a similar thing happening, where whatever it is, person, predator, alien, whatever, that's after people in the woods. If you take their shoes off, it'll, still like shooting fish in a barrel, but you get a little sport out of it.
Yeah. We had ran across some strange stuff out where we research, and you may have heard of the place, Brown Springs, Oklahoma. But we have found what looked like a small or young female's clothes, basically her whole wardrobe, just folded up out in the middle of the woods, just sitting there.
Yeah, that's creepy. That to me, that just something happened here. That just
Right.
There's no rational explanation for that.
So we've ran across stuff like that, and it's we found a nightgown, fuzzy nightgown hanging in a tree on a clothes hanger. I think that was just messing with people, hang it back there in trees and
There's practical jokers out there too, but I've come across stuff like that in some of my travels. Came across a pair of pantyhose way out off trail in the middle of nowhere, just laying there and hadn't been there long. I've seen shoes before, things like that. So I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah, a lot of it doesn't make sense, and it's like there's a case out of Lipan, Texas that we've been trying to find some information on, and it's not a missing person. I mean, they found the guy relatively quick, but the weird part about it is the only wounds on the body where his throat was ripped out, not cut, ripped out.
Now, to me, that sounds like Dogman.
Well, see, and the thing about it now here's a pretty good twist to it. The coroner and the sheriff's deputies said it was a big cat. Okay. The game warden and their civilian contracted tracker said no. There was no sign of a big cat anywhere. It was not a big cat attack, but we can't tell you what it is.
Interesting. No comment, as they say.
So it boggles the mind, because I'm kind of thinking, Dogman too, because I've had my own little encounter with Dogman pretty close up, but
I have to interject, Steve. When you mentioned Dogman, you hit Texas. That's close to Texas' heart, so I knew that this would be coming. Go forward, Tex.
But and actually, you're going to be at the Dogman conference, aren't you?
Yeah, that's correct. Coming up in August, I believe it's the 12th and 13th. I believe maybe the 8th and 9th.
Over in Paris, Tennessee.
Paris, Tennessee. Yeah, I'm a Tennessee boy myself, originally from East Tennessee, so anxious to be back in that area. Really looking forward to that. Got a lot of heavy hitters there. Nick Redford's going to be there. David Weatherly, Josh Wolf Turner, and he's the one putting it on from Paranormal Roundtable there. Ken Gerhardt's host and master of ceremonies. Barton Nunley going to be there. Do you know Barton? Really great guy from Kentucky. He goes out and hunts Dogman with a sword and a spear, as God intended. Now that's hardcore. But
I may or may not make it up there. I've been invited. I've been invited by Josh. I was on Josh's show, and then he came over on our show, and then I went on his show. So, but we met over in Mineola, Texas, at the conference over there a few months ago, and kind of hit it off. And he invited me. He goes, "You got tickets waiting on you. Show up." So if I can swing it, I'm going to make it. But
but it's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully it'll be an annual event. They're going to see how this one does. And a lot of people have asked why at Paris, Tennessee. Well, right there where Paris is, you're just right there. Land between the lakes is about 12 miles away. A lot of Dogman sighting and stuff up there. In fact, I'm not staying there where the conference is. I've rented a fishing cabin up on the Kentucky lake there, and I'm going to see what I see out in the woods there.
And Steve, you mentioned Land Between the Lakes. We all know the popular story, the original story that everyone's heard about. So with that being said, have you got anything different to add to that? Have you had any other tales from that national park or that forest regarding any cryptid activity or missing people activity?
Not that I can think of right off, other than I know there's a lot of activity in the area that is attributed to dog man or some kind of cryptid, whether
Right.
it's some sort of shapeshifter or what have you. But interesting area. Like I said, I'm looking forward to getting to explore at least a little bit up there. But just about any national park or national forest or even the state parks and stuff, if you look hard enough, you will find something that's occurred there with the missing. Sometimes it's just normal,
Right.
if there is such thing,
Sure.
ordinary missing persons case. But people go missing in the woods. And you asked about portals earlier. That's another really interesting theory. People that survive, that come back, talk about how they'll be walking on a clearly marked trail, and then all of a sudden they're not on the trail anymore. And they look around behind them. There's no trail that they've been on. There's just no trail. Nothing is recognizable. Sometimes they make it back, whether they come back through a portal or how that happens, I don't know. And there's also been people that have talked about when they were missing that they could see and hear the searchers, and they're yelling and screaming and waving their hands. And they said it's like the people don't see them, don't hear them. It's like they're not even there. Another thing, people hear voices sometimes when they're in the woods, either lost or not. A lot of times it'll come from a cave or from farther in the woods, or sound like it's coming from different directions. I heard of a Bigfoot sighting where a guy heard, first it was a baby crying and then a woman screaming coming out of a cave. And he wouldn't go in it, but then just shortly after that, he had a Bigfoot encounter. And he thinks it was something trying to lure him in that cave. So there's things that mimic humans out there. One of the most interesting ones I heard about was a guy that heard his own voice calling to him. And the voice said to him, "It's me, it's you, it's us. Come and join me. Come and join yourself." And I don't know about you, but I don't want to see my doppelganger. That's supposed to be a doom omen right there.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of times people hear the voice of a loved one. And again, it's usually from a cave or from deeper in the woods or someplace that you wouldn't want to go. Now, there's people that explain that away, kind of debunk it and say, well, you're dehydrated, you're hungry, you've been lost. You could be delirious and having auditory hallucinations and things. But I don't know. There's a lot of examples of it for it to be such a common thing for everybody to have.
It
And
is,
everybody does, but it does happen here. Several reports of people hearing voices, some sort of mimic, a loved one, or in that one case, the guy himself calling to himself to come and join himself in the cave.
Well, we've captured audio of all kinds of that stuff. One time we were out and we was at the campsite and we heard a female voice. There was probably 6 or 8 of us in camp. We heard a female laughing in the woods on one side of the camp, and a few minutes later, she was laughing at us on the other side of the camp.
Yeah.
So, and I've captured voices that I didn't hear at the time. I've captured growls, all kinds of stuff out there. But we were talking about the LBL incident. We have you may know of her, Jessica Jones. She's a remote viewer. She's an accomplished remote viewer. Mm-hmm. And she's part of our channel, and she actually remote viewed that incident. And come to find out, there was actually 2 dog men involved.
Interesting. Now that would make more sense, I think. I've never heard that, but I'm aware of Jessica, familiar with her work, but that puts a whole new spin on it.
Yeah, she's removed. What she does on our channel is her show is on Fridays, and it's called Remote Viewing Investigations with Jessica Jones, and she remote views all these alleged cryptid attacks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And she's done the Dutloff Pass incident. She's done the Port Lock or whatnot. I never can remember in Alaska.
Yeah, that's on my list to go visit. Sandy and I have got a trip planned to Alaska. And we're going to try and spend the night in Port Lock. It's kind of hard to get to. I can't remember the little town that's the closest you can actually fly into. And then you either have to take a boat or a seaplane to get over to Port Lock. But I'm willing to give it a go for at least one night. May live to regret it, or maybe the last you ever hear of me. But
Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think isn't Alaska, of all our states, is that the one where the most missing persons
Yeah,
or
per state, it has more than
per-
anywhere. Now, a lot of it that's explainable just because of the
yeah,
harsh environment there, the ice and snow, and then all the water and things surrounding it, and just a lot of death by misadventure there too. Uh,
yes,
Alcohol consumption, it's also, I think, the number one state for alcohol consumption, and alcohol and cold weather don't mix. You have too much to drink, wander out in the snow, that's pretty much the end of you. But
okay,
and
yeah,
again, with the amount of snow and things there you get in some places, some of those bodies may never be found, until the spring thaw, if even then. And there's bear, grizzly, and things like that there that will happily devour a body.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't have a problem at all with having a snack out of us.
right,
The amount, and I know we touched on this, the amount of missing people that we talk about, and the different phenomena that could be causing this, and I agree with you. I think it's a plethora of different things. You're not going to nail it down to one. And unfortunately, a lot of people try, but it's not all supernatural. It's not all paranormal. It's not all, critters. Some of it's just dumbass humans. I mean,
yeah,
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest reasons, just
Yeah.
people being a hazard to themselves,
Yeah.
Darwin effect or whatever you want to call
Yeah,
it.
there you go.
But
Because
it's not any one thing, but it's a little bit of everything.
right,
Sometimes there's an overlap. Sometimes there will be a rational explanation right on top of a supernatural occurrence that happened. So it's not anything where you can clearly delineate it's this, or this. It's maybe a little bit of all those working in conjunction with one another. So there's so much stuff that we don't understand with our scientific minds and things that
right.
yeah,
just because you can't reproduce it in a laboratory doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Exactly.
I've had missing time. I've gotten
Me
lost in the
too.
woods before.
yeah,
One of the strangest things that ever happened to me, I was up in the Smoky Mountains. I grew up in that area, so I talk about the Smokies a lot. In fact, my first book that I wrote for the National Park Mysteries and Disappearances series, it's all about the Smokies. And it is the number one most visited national park in the country. Even during everything that was going on last year, it had over 12 million visitors. Yosemite was number two with like 5 or 6 million. Yosemite actually has more missing than the Smokies. But I was up there one time. I've been up to Clingman's Dome, which is the highest point in the Smokies, and I still sometimes go off trail. That time I had not this one, but one like a little Garmin GPS with me. I always carry one of these and extra batteries because a lot of people take their cell phones. Well, there's places where you can't get a cell signal, but
right,
with an actual GPS, or better yet, a personal locator beacon, if you can get a clear sky, get out from under the tree canopy to where you can hit those satellites, you can find out where you're at with that, or learn to read a compass. That's the way I started. Learned orienteering in a hiking and skiing club when I was in high school, and that'll never fail you. And if you
Well,
look
and
sharp
that's
on
what
the
I tell
stars,
everybody.
again, it's if sometimes it's hard to get where you can see the stars, but if you can navigate by the stars.
Right.
But I've been up to Clingman's Dome. I was coming back down, and it was in the afternoon, and I came across a clearing. And in this clearing, there was a tree, and it was a tree that was just out of place on the Smokies. I think it was a big old oak tree or something up there at that elevation. I think there's some red oak and thing up there, but this looked like a Disney tree, fellas. This thing didn't even look real. It was surreal looking. And the way the sunlight was coming through the clouds and the other trees and stuff, it looked like there was a light shining on it. I walked over there, and I'm just kind of marveling at it, like, I don't know what to think about this. Big tree would take 3 or 4 people holding hands to reach all the way around it. And I noticed it got real quiet. And that's always, to me, that's a heads up to get out of somewhere. If you're in there, and I mean dead silence, like somebody turned down the volume knob, you're in a vacuum or something. You don't hear the birds, you don't hear the wind in the trees, you don't hear the water if there's any nearby. But it got real quiet like that. And all of a sudden I had this thought, that looks comfortable. I bet if I sat down there, that'd be a good place to rest. And, might even be a good place to just stretch out and take a nap. And then all of a sudden, like my real thought process kicked in, and I thought, where did that thought even come from? I said, it's going to be dark here soon. I'm way off trail. And if I don't get back to the parking area, I'm going to have a hard time getting out of here. But it was like something in the forest was trying to lull me into this sense of, oh, when you're tired, that'd be a good place to
Oh,
rest. Go
wow.
ahead, stretch out, lay down, take a nap. And I think if I'd listened to whatever voice that was in my head, I'd be one of the missing in the Smokies, or would have had some kind of strange occurrence or something there. That still gives me chills to think about it. But again, my rational side kicked in. I'm like, get the hell out of here.
Well, you hear that when you was talking about the Fae earlier. You hear that a lot from from that. They lull you into just laying down, taking a nap, and then
Even in fictional stories, Rip Van Winkle, he was wandering in the woods in New England, came across little men bowling, playing 10 pins in the woods, joined them, drank some of their ale or whatever they were drinking there, fell asleep, woke up, had a beard longer than mine, and 20 years had passed or whatever it was. I don't remember the exact story, but who's to say that's not based on actual events that occurred somewhere? Because there are people that have gone missing and then either showed back up, and there was one case we covered where a guy had been missing for days, but he only thought that he had been missing for a couple of hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's been other people that were just missing for a few minutes, maybe an hour or two, but yet they remembered seeing the sun go down and come up, maybe in some cases a couple of times. So what's up with that? There's a disruption in the very fabric of time there. There's some kind of glitch or portal or something.
And Steve, too, that you bring that up. I was perusing through your channel, and I seen one of the episodes you did where people turned up missing. They're missing. Then all of a sudden, they didn't show up hours or days later, but it was years later, right? I think actually you have a story on that, and that to me is quite bizarre. And and some of these people didn't even know where they were. Perhaps I know you got a story on that. If you want to touch on that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I've got several stories on that. I'm trying to think if there's a particular one you're talking about there. There's so many of them just between my books and everything we've done on the channel. I get them a little confused sometimes. But there's one particular story I remember well about a little boy in Africa that vanished. His grandfather had left him on the sidewalk where he went in when he went into a shop, came back out. The little boy's gone. They couldn't find him anywhere. They looked. 6 months almost to the day, he shows up on the sidewalk in the same place where he'd been, wearing the same clothing, but he had been somewhere. He remembered, he talked about being in a city and the sun being a different color, and I think there was 2 moons or something like that, and that basically it sounded like a UFO encounter. He talked about being taken aboard a vessel that was shiny and had windows and things in it. Sounds like he was taken and traveled on some kind of journey, but he didn't realize how he thought he'd only been gone a little while, but he'd been gone 6 months. And there was another recent story, fairly recent, about a guy that was skiing in Canada, Niagara Falls up there, disappeared, shows up, I think it's a couple weeks later in, I think it's San Diego, somewhere in California, still wearing his skiing clothes, but with a haircut and a phone that he had no memory of purchasing. And the only thing he remembered was a truck driver had picked him up somewhere and was letting him out wherever they found him there in California. But he had no memory. He said the last thing he remembered was skiing. The next thing he knows, he's getting down out of a truck, doesn't realize where he's at, where'd all the snow go, who cut my hair, how'd I get this phone? Now, again, that one, some people have theorized that was somebody that maybe decided to run away and start over, a new life. That happens sometimes.
Sure.
And then had a change of heart. But if not, I mean, that's a really strange tale, because you have people that do that. John List is a good example. Family, he murdered his entire family in Ohio. I think he's in New Jersey, and then fled to Ohio, changed his name, started over. One of the TV shows, I think it's Unsolved Mysteries or America's Most Wanted, actually outed him. They ran the story, and people in the little town where he was living at the time recognized him, and he'd been there for years. And likewise, another story like that, people think, well, about the feral people and the people hiding in the woods and stuff, that's not possible. But Eric Rudolph, the abortion clinic bomber, was at the top of the FBI's most wanted list at one time. He hid out in Nantahala National Forest, which is just south of the Smokies there, for about 5 years. And this was a man with no outdoor experience or anything. He was just good at hiding, I guess. The way he finally got caught, he was sneaking into some little town there and getting day-old bread and pastries and stuff out of the dumpster. And a rookie cop recognized him. So it is possible to go into the woods and hide if that's what you choose to do, if you wanted to go in and go off grid. And I think there's people that do that. I mean, we talked earlier about pot growers and meth cookers and things like that doing that sort of thing. But if there's feral people that have been in the woods all their lives, how easy would it be for them to slip in, slip out, move around, and not be seen if they didn't want to be seen? So food for thought.
It certainly is food for thought. And, we're coming up on 52 minutes here. I'd like to get back talking more about the feral people and maybe the government involvement aspects. And I got another question that I'm not going to ask now because, again, we got about 40 seconds before we have to go to break. So everybody listening on iHeartRadio, everybody listening over on Odyssey Radio, subscribe to Texas Front Porch, Bigfoot Michigan Rob. Either one, doesn't matter. We're all the same. Come on over. You got to hear the second half with Steve Stockton and the missing persons and mysteries, that is. And thanks, Steve. And before you go, why don't you plug your book and everything else before we let you go for the first half?
Absolutely. Now, I've got some other books. I've got Strange Things in the Woods, which is stories from my family and friends of family and things like that, which is just what it sounds like. Strange things found, seen, observed in the woods. And when that book first came out, I'd go on shows like this, and invariably the guest or the audience would ask, these are other people's stories. Do you have any stories? That's where My Strange World comes from. That's the first book of my own personal paranormal encounters. And then recently I've done National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, Volume 1, Great Smoky Mountains, Volume 2, California, and I could do 2 or 3 more volumes on California, and Volume 3, the Pacific Northwest. So that's the most recent ones. And then Jade and I wrote a book recently. Yeah. That's 101 Tales of Terror, like encounters, ghost stories, things like that. True stories.
That's great, Steve. Steve Stockton, everybody listening on the radio side, come back. YouTube, Texas Front Porch, Bigfoot Michigan Rob. We'll find the button text, and we'll take a quick 5-minute break. Excuse me.
We'll figure it out. That's for sure.
We definitely will, Tex.
We'll see you in 5 minutes.
All right.
Four minutes to go, folks. 4 minutes. Three minutes. We're almost there. 2-minute warning, guys. 2-minute warning. One minute. 1 minute. And we're back, folks. I'm going to bring everybody up here in just a second. Y'all get ready for the second half of the show. I've got a case that I want to ask Steve about after we get done with this subject we're talking about. And it always struck me as weird, so I can't wait to get his opinion on it. Let me get the host of the show.
Yeah,
Bigfoot,
thanks.
Rob, back up here.
Yeah, and if anyone sees me not in the captain's chair, because I screwed up the beginning of the show, so that's just the way it goes, man. We learn as we go. And you can go ahead and bring up Steve before we get into we'll finish up the topic. And I did have a quick question for Steve.
Yes, sir.
We're talking about high strangeness and just a weird phenomenon. Have you ever heard accounts of people, a group of hikers, maybe there's 8 hikers, and they're walking through the forest, and the person at the end of the line, let's say they're walking in a single file. I've heard many accounts of people, the last person just turns up missing, and within seconds, they can't find the person. They turn around. Their group of 8 is now a group of 7, and it always seems to be the last person that vanishes. I mean, how do we? And there's no evidence
how do you account for that?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories like that we've covered where it's always the last one in line, or sometimes if they walk ahead, the first one in line. So you don't want to be the first or the last. Try to stay in the middle if you don't want to go missing. But again, you think that if something took them, they would at least have heard something, heard a commotion, heard maybe a scream, even a muffled one or a sudden one. But again, they're just gone. And covered a really unusual case. That was on, I think that was at Mount Rainier, I believe. I get them mixed up sometimes when I'm just talking off the cuff like this. But I had 3 climbers that were going up toward the summit on a rope. And the 2 of them get to the top. They pull the rope up, and it's tied off in a butterfly knot. The other guy had cut himself loose, and they never found him. They don't know if what reason he would have had to cut himself loose, because they were, ice climbing, snow climbing. So it would have been most assuredly probably a very, very bad idea to detach yourself from the rope, especially cutting the rope. And they thought, well, maybe he's playing a trick on us and passing us. And I don't know how you would do that if you're climbing with a group on a rope, that how you would be able to pass him and get ahead of him. But they got to the summit. He wasn't there. They go back down. He's not at the base waiting on them. Where'd he go? And they had found some evidence that he or somebody may have been in an ice cave on the slope briefly, but none of his effects there. There was nothing really to indicate that it was him, if I'm remembering correctly. And they never found him. They thought, well, if he did fall, he's going to be, down below us. And there wasn't any place that they were aware of or that they noticed where he could have went in where they couldn't find him. And then, of course, they continued looking for him on into the spring when the snow in the lower parts near the base melted him. Body was never found. So that's a weird one, I think, where just what happened. Did he cut himself loose? Did something or somebody cut him loose? And then where'd he go? Well, the people remarked that he wasn't on top of the mountain. He wasn't at the bottom of the mountain. He either went into the mountain or he went straight up. And we've heard that in a lot of cases. There's been other missing persons cases where that's what law enforcement or the search and rescue would say. He's not on the mountain. He either went up or went in. Now, there's some places like that. Mount Shasta is a prime example of places where people claim there are things, even cities inside the mountain. You ever heard the story about Robot Grandma? That's one of my favorites. That's from Mount Shasta. Little boy got separated from his family. We're camping up there, went missing. And while he was trying to find his way back, he sees what he thinks is his grandma. Well, she takes him, but not back to the campsite. She takes him back to a cave on Mount Shasta. And inside this cave, he said that there was backpacks and old rifles, rusty rifles and things like that. Everything was covered in cobwebs and dust. And then he suddenly begins to realize that this isn't his grandmother at all, but a robot, in his words, 3-year-old kid that looked like his grandma. And she tried to get him to defecate on a piece of paper for reasons unknown. He wouldn't do that. So she's like, you're not cooperating. I'm just going to take you back. She took him back out on the trail, set him down, said, wait here. Somebody will come for you. And sure enough, a few hours later, they found him in an area that had already been searched. That happens frequently, too. An area that's been searched maybe multiple times over multiple days, they'll find the person deceased. Almost like whatever had them has put it there to kind of taunt them. Say, well, I had them all the time, and you searched here. Here they are. But anyway, the little boy, he gets home, and he didn't really tell anybody that story right away. I think he did tell his parents at a later time. But he's staying with his paternal grandma, and he said, I don't like the other grandma. And she thought he meant his maternal grandmother. And he's like, oh, well, she's like, oh, what's wrong with her? And he said, no, not her. He said, the other grandma that looked like you but wasn't you. And she's like, what are you talking about? He said, you remember when I went missing and you couldn't find me? Then he told the story, and she called her son up. It's like, what's this kid been watching? What kind of stories are you telling or stuff? But the father was like, we heard it too. We don't know where he got it at. But the woman thought back. She had been camping on Mount Shasta previous to this and had heard some kind of disturbance outside the tent. All she remembered was seeing red eyes outside in the darkness. The next thing she remembered, she came to. She was out of the tent, lying face down in the dirt, and was found to have a puncture wound in the back of her neck. Now, what's that all about? It almost sounds like somebody took something out of her and made this clone of her that the little boy encountered, and it's running around in a cave on Mount Shasta. But that's a weird spot. A lot of legendary stuff there, ascended masters and a lot of New Age. There's been entire religions founded around things seen on Mount Shasta. People claim that that's where the Lemurians settled, that there's cities of gold inside the mountain. It's to this day, it's still a popular New Age spot. There's reading rooms and crystal metaphysical stores and things in the little town there. But one of the coolest Bigfoot stories I've ever heard, it's actually 2 in 1. It's on Mount Shasta. A lady was hiking on the slopes there and came across what she described as a female Bigfoot giving birth on the slopes there under a tree. Well, in the same area, a year later, another lady, and they didn't know each other, didn't exchange stories or anything, but another lady observed, same area, a female Bigfoot nursing a baby Bigfoot. So you think about that. One lady sees it giving birth. A year later, another woman sees it nursing. Wow. And they didn't get together and make up a story. It was told independently of one another. So I like that story. That's an interesting one.
Oh yeah, that is pretty sweet.
I wanted to get your opinion on a case that it always baffled me, and it's the story of Henry McCabe.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That one, if you've ever heard that voicemail, that
Yeah.
is one of the most chilling pieces of audio I've ever heard.
Right.
There's a whooshing sound like maybe he was being taken up. There was a gurgling sound like maybe he was being strangled or drowning, being held underwater. And then at the very end, there's a voice, and I can't remember exactly what the creepy voice says. It was like, "Stop it," or "Be quiet," or something like that.
Yeah.
And again, no idea what the circumstances were on that. Now there is some side notes to that. He was involved with some kind of financial dealings from another country. I think it's Liberia or something like that. And supposedly, while he was out with his friends, he had too much to drink. But instead of taking him home, they took his car keys and I think his wallet too, and dropped him at a gas station. And then he was supposedly walking from the gas station trying to find his way home. And then that was the voicemail that his wife received. But if anybody that's never heard it, look up Henry McCabe audio. And like I said, it'll put a chill up your spine, whatever the circumstances were.
That makes no sense. I understand taking somebody's keys. I do. But you don't take their wallet and you don't just drop them at a gas station.
Yeah.
If that's the case, you need new friends.
You need a new set of friends, indeed.
Yeah, who needs friends when they have enemies like that?
Yeah, and there are other missing persons cases like that aren't in the woods and things. A lot of college kids that have gone missing while drinking in a bar. There's CCTV footage of them going in. None of them ever coming out. Sometimes they're never found, or they'll be found a couple of weeks later in the water if there's any water nearby. And the thing about that, they won't necessarily have died of drowning. And the body, even though they've been missing for a couple of weeks or more, the body will appear to have only been in the water for a couple of days. So what's up with that? We've got a theory that we expounded on, made a little mini documentary called the Smiley Face Killer Theory. And again, that's Ted Gunderson and ex-FBI agent and another guy wrote a book called Forensic Studies in Drowning. And they believe that there's a group of serial killers that somehow get together on the dark web or CB radio or whatever and plan these killings out. And one thing that's common near wherever these bodies are found on a bridge or an overpass, there will be smiley face graffiti. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. That's the smiley face graffiti is probably one of the most spray painted graffiti symbols in the world, but it is kind of odd. And then the whole thing with them being found in the water. And you have that in other countries too. Manchester, England, they've got a person or an entity that they refer to as the pusher. They keep finding people in the canal there. And I've been to the UK. There's more surveillance and more CCTV cameras there than there was in Las Vegas, which there's a lot in Vegas, but there was more in the UK. And again, video of these people going into places, and then they find them in the water, but no video exists of them coming out or anybody pushing them in the water or anything like that. So,
well, I think
there,
that makes me think of that the video of the young woman in the elevator was acting really strange, and then they find her in the water tank on top of the building.
Yeah, Lisa Lamb at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. That's strange. I don't buy the official story on that one either.
That's not the only incident at that hotel. That hotel's got a dark reputation.
Oh, it goes back. There's a lot of people that have gone off the roof of it. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker serial killer, he lived at the Cecil Hotel while he was out doing his devilish deeds. It has a dark history.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned a pack of serial killers, because that's not the first time that's came up. And they caught one guy. He was a trucker, and I hate this because truckers are the lifeblood of this country as far as I'm concerned. But they captured him. And he said that there were 7 of them that would exchange information on the CB. They had their own little code worked out and everything, and they would actually meet and trade victims.
Yeah, I've heard that story. One of them supposedly,
and I think one or two of them were women.
Yeah,
were in it.
You've had female serial killers. Look at Eileen Wuornos. Mm-hmm. But I've heard that story, and it seems like one of those guys, his CB handle was Stargazer, and I thought that was kind of creepy because it goes into the whole thing, kind of like with the Zodiac killer, where he seemed to be doing stuff by the stars, by the Zodiac signs. But I wouldn't doubt that. I mean, there are a lot of them that have operated in pairs, so I can't believe it'd be that much of a stretch to add a few more like-minded individuals in and work as a group. I don't know how you would initially start something like that. I mean, put that on Craigslist or, wanted people into murder and killing. But, at this point, I've seen and experienced so many things just myself and listened to all these stories of other people. Because I can't discount anything. Because some of my own stories, if I hadn't been there to see it, I probably wouldn't believe it. Hey,
Steve, for those who don't know, Steve does talk quite a bit on his channel about true crime, and I like to delve in that a little bit. But I did have a question that we'll get into here. When we talk about the numbers, the missing persons numbers and all this, and sure, I think a lot of it is skewed, but let me ask you your opinion. I don't know if you've done a story on this or not. What's your thoughts on government involvement with some of these missing people? I mean, certainly we talk about cryptids, we talk about aliens, we talk about unknown phenomenon, but how much of this is actually, in your opinion, brought upon us by the alphabet groups?
Yeah, well, that's a definite possibility, something that we've considered and looked at, not in every case, of course, but in certain cases. The government is either directly involved or indirectly involved, as in they know about it and allow it to continue and cover it up. And again, you're kind of getting into the arena of conspiracy theory or conspiracy fact, I believe in some cases. A lot of people don't believe in that, but really all conspiracy is where two or more people got together to decide to do something nefarious. And some of the stuff that we've heard about in the past turned out to be true. One of the most famous ones, Operation Paperclip, where the U.S. government brought over scientists from Germany after the war, and instead of execute them or put them on trial for war crimes, they put them to work. A lot of people didn't believe that, but just so happens, I grew up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, or just outside Oak Ridge, Tennessee. My dad was a scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and he worked alongside some of these guys that were right off the plane from Germany. And in fact, where I went to elementary school, it was a weird mix. It was a rural elementary school in West Knox County. Had a lot of farm kids, and then you had kids whose parents worked out at the plants out there. Either the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the K-25 was a gaseous diffusion plant, Y-12 was a nuclear weapons plant, things like that. So there was a lot of rocket heads and PhDs and stuff that I went to school with their kids too. So you had an odd mix. But there was this one kid had a German last name. I won't say his name. He's still around. He's actually a sheriff's deputy in a certain city in East Tennessee now. But I'd gone over to his house after school one time. We were probably in the 7th grade or so. And nice house there. It had a finished basement downstairs. They had a rec room down there, family room. And we were down there doing something. He's like, "Come here, I want to show you something." And he goes to the far wall, pushes on the wood grain paneling there, and a door opens up. And I thought, that's cool. A lot of houses built in that area. This house was probably built in the late 50s, early 60s. A lot of those houses had a bomb shelter. It was the height of the Cold War. We didn't have one, but I knew other kids that did. So I thought, he's going to show me the bomb shelter. Well, he opens it up, turns on the light switch, and there was the largest collection of German memorabilia in there that I've ever seen, military stuff. And I'm just like marveling at all this. And I said, "Your dad really likes his war memorabilia." And he pointed to a uniform there, a very high-ranking officer's uniform. And he said, "You don't understand." He said, "That was my dad's uniform." So here was a guy that basically had this shrine to the Third Reich in his basement. He worked out the plants alongside my dad. So who knows? And the guy was a big ham radio operator. And years after that, I used to think, was he still in contact with spies, or was he a double agent, or who knows? Something to think about. But again, Operation Paperclip, that was one that people tried to debunk and just say it was indisputably fake and all this, but it wasn't.
No.
The Tuskegee experiment, another one where the government involvement, where they experimented on people. They exposed them to diseases just to see how it would travel within the community without their knowledge or consent. So don't get me wrong. I love my country, but I don't trust my government. Not all the time anyway.
Yeah, I always say bringing up the government involvement. It seems like, especially in this world we live in today, that's the way it goes. That's the way it runs. You always have to question that.
It pays to. I mean, you can't be diligent enough, because everybody's got an agenda. Everybody's got something that they're working on, especially with these alphabet agencies, and then some of what they call the black bag agencies, the one that nobody knows anything about, that are offshoots of some of those letter agencies, that the really, really secret stuff. So who knows? I mean, is it the Illuminati? Is it the New World Order? Is it the Rothschilds? Maybe. I've found the more I delve into this stuff, there are no answers, and it's no longer for me. And I've been doing this for a lot of years. It's a quest for the next set of questions.
I've been doing this not nearly as long as you in the last couple of years. My brain has been exposed to so many different hypotheses, right, that it's just flabbergasting to think about certain things that I never would have thought about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, it just amazes me when, because you talk about serial killers, and the thing about it is, a lot of people have the misunderstanding that that's a relatively modern thing, and it's not. A lot of people, they talked about for a long time that Warnish was the first female serial killer. She was far from it.
Oh yeah, there was. You look back historically, even here, in the 1700s, 1800s, there were people that women that would murder people, that would take travelers, a single gentleman in as boarders, and then dispatch them, steal whatever they had, dispose of the body. And certain time, it was a lot harder to keep up with people and track people back then. Just people that all they know is they went missing. No
well,
idea.
Not the one that sticks out to me is I can't remember her name, of the Countess that
Elizabeth
she killed.
Bathory.
Yeah, good, great. I mean,
yeah, she thought bathing in the blood of young girls, particularly virgins, would keep her young and healthy. And that's kind of where ties in with some of the Dracula legends and things. That I think she drank the blood too, but she did enjoy bathing in it. Thought it would keep her young and wrinkle free.
Yeah.
We all know how that worked out.
The mindset of these psychopaths, and I say all the time, there's more psychopaths out there than people understand, because all serial killers are psychopaths, but not all psychopaths are killers.
That's true.
Right.
And one of their abilities is to fit in, to be a comedian. Look at somebody like Ted Bundy, until they found out all the stuff he had done and been into. He just, the average guy. The Stranger Beside Me, Ann Rule, wrote about when she worked with him in a call center and stuff, that it just never suspect anything like that. Same with a lot of these people. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, worked at the postal facility. Jeffrey Dahmer worked at a chocolate factory.
Well, Gary Ridgway.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most prolific serial killers out there.
Yep. And that reminds me, in October, Sandy and I are going to be at the Pacific Northwest True Crime Fest in Auburn, Washington, on the campus of the Green River College there. And that's the area that
Green River Killer
plied his trade in. So looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the dates right offhand. It's, I think, the first or second week of October. We've written a book about the missing and murdered indigenous women in North America. That's another epidemic that's the elephant in the room that you don't hear a lot of talk about on the reservations. So all these women and men, boys too, that go missing, but particularly women, they're either being murdered, they're being trafficked, and you don't hear a lot about it outside the reservation. You go out into where I'm moving there in New Mexico, it's right in the edge of the Navajo reservation. You go into a convenience store out there on the reservation land, and the walls are just covered with missing women. And they don't take just young, pretty women either. One of the cases we covered, LMA Begay, grandmother in her 60s, master weaver. Why would they take anything like that? Well, you think about it, they're not going to traffic them. But if they're taking all these other girls and doing things with them, they need somebody to cook and clean and sew and care for the girls. So there you go. It kind of makes sense in that regard. That,
well, and unfortunately, and I know this is very, very dark, but unfortunately, these rings that abduct people, they have niches and requests to fill. I mean, it's like ordering off a menu, as bad as that sounds. If somebody had a thing for, elderly women.
That's true. Yeah, there's as many fetishes as there are people, I think, sometimes. Yep. And everything is somebody's fetish. Yep. Even something simple like I used to know a girl that was a model, and she would get requests. Guy wanted to buy pictures of her vacuuming in high heels and stockings. Okay. Again, whatever floats your boat, as long as it's consenting adults and not harming anybody. But there's some people that don't play by those rules. I mean, you hear about the snuff films and things like that. I think those exist. So,
along those lines, one of the big topics that is being talked about here lately for some reason, I'm not real sure why, is consensual cannibalism. Mm-hmm. Now, I know there was that one case in Germany, I do believe, where was it Germany? Where the guy,
I believe it was Germany, or one of the people
involved out,
citizen.
And I mean, that's a very gray area. I mean, if you want to play devil's advocate, mm-hmm. that's a very gray area when consent comes into play.
Yeah, apparently the man did give consent for the man mm-hmm. to humanely put an end to him, and then he had his mm-hmm. permission to eat him.
Well, they actually, if you really read into it, and I know this gets really dark, guys, and I'm sorry, but I'm telling you, these fictitious movies that they come up with serial killers and stuff, that ain't nothing compared to reality. Mm-hmm. But when that happened, before he killed the guy, he actually cooked and shared parts of his body with the guy for lunch.
Yeah.
They said, I mean, and it's like, it's just, there's just,
I don't know. I can't even wrap my head around that mindset of wanting to eat human flesh. I mean, I've had, passing thought before, wonder what it would taste like, taste like chicken, or I've read stories of in some of the Asian countries during famines that they had to resort to cannibalism. They called it either long pig or talking
long pig. Yep.
Yeah. And I remember once when I was in Las Vegas, I was working at one of the casinos out there as a manager, and in the employee buffet, they had the list of what they had there. And it was really good food. They fed their employees good. Usually the same stuff is on the buffet upstairs for the guests, but somebody had snuck and written on there. It's one of those like the neon chalkboard things, and somebody had written long pig on there, just haha, it's a joke. And there was an Asian woman that worked in the casino. I think she was a dealer, some kind of table games dealer, and she came in there and saw that and about had a nervous breakdown. I mean, she had a screaming fit.
I bet.
Got the people from the kitchen out there, and she's yelling at them and putting her finger in their face. And most of those guys were Hispanic or Latino. They had no idea what she was talking about, nor who wrote it up there. But again, somebody's idea of a joke. And I just, based on the reaction that was described, she was probably one of those people that had been forced to do that at some point, or had a family member or knew someone that had been eaten. So,
yeah, You know, Steve, I was going to ask you too. We talk about all these like individuals coming up missing, or sometimes a group of people. But here's another segment. Have you come across any stories simply about a couple, a man and a woman? They're going out a romantic evening in a forest and they don't return. Because you always hear about an individual, sometimes a group, but what about down Lover's Lane? People go out, they don't come back.
That happens too. We put out a video recently about a week or two ago, couples who went missing, and that's what it is. Where both of them disappeared. Now, those I tend to think there's some sort of foul play involved in a lot of those cases, just
Yeah.
because of the circumstances, but it can happen. And one of the strangest encounters I ever heard about that's kind of along those lines is in my Strange Things in the Woods book, and I knew the person that found this. Her and another friend were hiking in a state park in Tennessee. They came across a fairly primitive campsite that hadn't been there a long time. Evidence that somebody had been there recently. Well, just a little farther behind that camp, they found two sets of clothing, male and female. She said there were shoes there. The stockings went into the shoes, and the gentleman's case, the stocking, his socks went up in the pants. His shirt was still tucked into the pants, and a belt. There was a t-shirt and a regular shirt there. They poked it with a stick and said there was something in the pocket, like maybe keys or change. Same way with the woman's outfit, penny loafers, a pair of white stockings went up into a skirt, blouse on top of that, and then I think there was a sweater on top of it. And it said that the arms of the clothing was crossed over, literally like they had laid down holding hands and just evaporated, just melted. There was no bones. There was no sign of any human remains there, but the clothing was in such a good condition that you could tell it hadn't been there very long.
Yeah.
And she said it scared the crap out of her and her friend, obviously, that was with her there. And so they got a really, really eerie feeling that they needed to get out of there, and sooner, not later. And she said that they didn't know what to do. They didn't really want to go to the police because they were scared. I mean, there's a couple of teenage girls, but she watched the papers, she said, for months after that. There was never any sign of anybody being found. There was never any report of anybody being missing that would have fit those criteria. But what was that? Was it an elaborate prank? I mean, that's a lot of trouble and a lot of work to go to when you don't get to see the payoff. You know, haha, we'll leave all our camping stuff out here. We'll lay our clothes out like we're in them, and then we'll just leave it. I think something happened to those people, but what took them? And one of the most interesting theories I've heard lately is a real head scratcher, and something that I'd never even considered. I'm not a theologian by any means. I'm not a religious person, but I am spiritual. But somebody put this to me this way: that what if the rapture, as it's talked about in Matthew, where it talks about two shall be in the field and one shall be taken and the other left behind, or women were milling flour, one was taken and the other left behind. This person posited to me, what if the rapture, the Christian version of the rapture, and again, some Christians don't even believe in that, but if it is a thing, what if it's not a singular event? What if, and the Bible talks about how to God, a year is like a day and a day is like a year, however it's stated. I'm paraphrasing there. But what if your time to be raptured is not the same as my time to be raptured? Okay. What if something, if it took you up, you raptured out, I'm still here till it's my turn if I make the cut? I mean, I never thought about that. I told that to a friend of mine, and he said, man, that gave me chills. He's like, I never even thought about that. And he's somebody that's well-versed in the missing in some of these cases and stuff. Again, a new theory, and I'm an insomniac, have been since childhood. That's the kind of stuff that rolls around in my head 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when I should be sleeping. So,
well, I guarantee you, there's one individual I'm going to bring that up to.
That had never occurred to me. I never thought of it like that. I've been bringing that up to the people. That would be an explanation for how somebody can just go missing out of a group and no trace left behind.
Yeah, that's strange.
Something to think about.
It certainly is.
Somebody was asking in chat, Steve, is there a way that they can buy your books and get autographed?
I'll have some available. I'm getting ready to move right now. After I get moved, I'll have them available directly from me, signed. So watch for that. I'll make an announcement on Facebook and on social media when that's about to happen. But otherwise, you can get the non-autographed versions, Kindle or paperback. They're available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold. My publisher likes for me to say that. They're listed in books in print, so you can walk into any bookstore and order them. You can ask your library to get them if you just want to borrow them. And they have been spotted in the wild. The strangest one so far, somebody sent me a picture from a Target in Florida that had one of my books on the shelf. No idea how that got there, but it can happen. I've walked into little independent bookstores and stuff and seen my books there. The one I'm waiting for is Piggly Wiggly. Once my books show up in Piggly Wiggly, I'm good to go. I don't know if they have Piggly Wiggly where you guys are at, but when I was a kid, that was my favorite grocery store to go to. I've even said if I could get to one, I'd have a book signing out in front of Piggly Wiggly. Do you guys know Connor Flynn, Bigfoot Anon?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That guy, he's something else. That's what he does. He'll go out and take a bunch of books on a card table. He'll set up in front of a bookstore or maybe a comic book shop and just sit there and sell signed books until somebody figures out who is this guy? Is he supposed to be here? And chase him out. And I think that's brilliant. Guerrilla book signing, just show up and sign till they make you leave. I may do that sometime.
You know, Steve, we had Connor Flynn on our show maybe a couple months ago, and one of the most animated shows we ever had, because in the background his arms are flailing all over the place, and he's still composed. He's telling his great stories, and that was a fun show. And you know what, Steve, this has been a fun show.
Absolutely.
We're coming up at the end of it. I appreciate you coming on. And again, you just gave us a promo or told us about where you can find our books. Where else can we find Steve Stockton with well over 200,000 subscribers, 30 million views? Steve, it's been a pleasure. Go ahead and sell yourself a little bit more. I just loved you, man.
Oh, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Missing Person Mysteries. That's the main channel. And then I have a personal channel, 13 Past Midnight. Not even to 10,000 subs over there yet, but close to it. I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff coming up over there. We went live 370 nights in a row over there. And so we're just kind of taking a little break, a little sabbatical. We got to the point we were playing old ghost story books from LibriVox, stuff that's in the public domain. But we've actually got some production videos that we've shot while we're on the road coming up over there. So stay tuned for that. I'm on Facebook. Steve Stockton 81 is how to find me on there. That's also the first part of my email address, stevestockton81@gmail.com. I love hearing from people. If you've got a story, you've got an experience, send it to me and I'll put it in one of our listener stories videos on 13 Past. Even though it's separate from the stuff we normally do on the channel, our main focus will always be missing people. If we can bring one person home or give one family closure on the downside of that, then we're doing what we've set out to do. Now, the mystery side of that name, anything kind of goes. True crime, ghosts, cryptids, you name it. So little mix of everything in there, but mainly missing people. But one of our most popular segments is listener stories. So what I'm getting ready to record now is episode 26. And that's where people have sent in whatever encounter they've had, whether they've gone missing and saw something weird, or Hat Man encounters, Glimmer Man, shadow people, aliens, Bigfoot, a little bit of everything. And that's what I love. It's real people telling real stories. And I like being able to give people a platform to do that, because a lot of these people that are experiencers, they're reticent to talk about it. But then when you hear other people telling their stories, it makes it easier for you to tell yours. So that's another of our missions there.
And I did want to say thank you, Steve. I noticed a lot of new people in our chat room here today. I know this because of you. So for all the newbies out there, subscribe to Texas Front Porch, Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. We do have 5 shows every week. Tex just somehow fell off. He fell off the planet. He's a missing person.
He's a missing.
Yeah, what happened? Steve, oh my Lord. We just lost him. Just like the guy in the back, like in the back of the trail.
Now there he's back. Now let's see. How long were you gone, Tex? How many days?
He puts me back in the captain's chair at the end of the show. I don't know about that one.
Yeah, all my folks that showed
I've been
up
gone 2 weeks, guys. What are y'all talking about?
All my folks that showed up to listen, lend your support. Go ahead and subscribe to both these guys' wonderful channels. Like, subscribe, and share on social media. Let's
Yeah.
get them over 1,000 anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And with that being said, I'm going to have Tex find the button to take us home. Steve, if you want to hang out for a couple minutes, I got something to tell you, and
All right.
and we're out. Thank you,
Rob
everybody in
Tex,
chat.
thanks
Love
again.
you all. Thank you, buddy. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody in chat and everyone's going to tune in later. Subscribe to our channel. Subscribe to Steve Stockton. Great guest, great times, and I can't wait for part 2. Tex, take us home.